Hello and welcome to the Drive-Thru. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing the final episode of Drive. It's the episode entitled Rearview, which originally hit Fox's website and iTunes on July 15th, 2007. Obviously, don't have viewership numbers because it only was online. Number one movie in America this week, like we said last time, was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and the number one song in America was Umbrella by Rihanna featuring Jay-Z. And we talked
Hmm.
about video games that came out last week, so go listen to that if you care.
Hmm.
Anyway, Dave, what happened in this episode?
With this episode, starts off with our two main crews of Alex and Karina and the brothers racing up to a particular checkpoint, stepping out to sort of figure out where they're supposed to head next when truck drives up and oh man, it's the people after Karina where Sam stops her and then she gets taken by those people. It's like, oh, oh, no.
Yeah, they do a really good job of setting up in the opening, like the cold open, that like, oh crap, something really bad's going to happen. Later on, we find out that it's all part of their plan, but it's a really effective cold open.
Yes, all the planning and scheming of things of all the particular stuff, because as we find out throughout most of the series and just more so within this episode, don't fuck with Alex. Ju- Just don't.
Yeah,
Because he's going to find the particular things. He's going to find what he wants, no matter what he has to do it.
yeah. So basically, this episode, they've how do I explain this? So Karina's basically gone undercover to the headquarters, I guess, of the people who are running this race because she wants to get information from them.
Yes, yes.
Alex basically makes them think that he's trading her to get an advantage in the race, but he also gives it to the Salazar brothers in exchange for them
Mm.
helping with the whole setup.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, that's really the major part of the episode. There's a few other little things, but it's more or less them trying to. They're trying to get information about the people running the race and how they
Hmm.
can kind of affect that.
I think with this one, it was trying to focus on the three stories that were going on, which from last week we were kind of missing out on one because it was kind of a bit more not really spoken of and just kind of a side thing with two other characters that we were focusing on within the race. But aside from the other storyline was, of course, the father-daughter issue from last episode being somewhat talked about, resolved, and continued on from that. But mostly from last week and this week, there was the racer of Wendy racing for her baby and the partner she picked up, I believe Ivy.
Yeah, yeah. She gets a call at the end of the last episode and accidentally kind of gives away where Sam, uh, Wendy's newborn, is being hidden
Yeah,
currently.
yeah, because as it sits, you do not mess with a mother when it comes to her baby with all stuff, and she drops Ivy to drive off, but she incidentally causes issue for her, but
Yeah.
Wendy manages to get back to her child and her husband.
Yes. And we also have Violet picks up Ivy, who's hitchhiking in this episode, which leads to some pretty good stuff between the two of them.
Well, somewhat hitchhiking. She was good at the start, but then she just decided to stand in the middle of the road, which it's a method.
I
It's not a
mean,
very good method.
Dave, did it work?
Yeah, it somewhat worked.
It
Thankfully,
worked. I mean,
thankfully Violet kind of swerved in time. So
yes, and Rob is turns himself over to the military because he is technically AWOL because his wife didn't tell him about the voicemails that had been left.
yes, with all that particular stuff and her particular storyline, where I was a little bit curious, why is it that she was so much focused within the credits until we got the oh, she's a pawn being used by someone within the corporation for specific race reasons.
Yes. Yeah, we don't know.
That gentleman being the guy that was chasing after Alex and Karina near the start few episodes.
Yes, and we don't really know what her role is because, again, this is the last episode, so we're not going to get any answers.
Pretty much, I just placed it as she's a pawn because
Yeah,
A, she not very bright on things, and B, she doesn't want to do much anyway.
this is true. We also find out where Alex's wife is, sort of, at the end of the episode.
Yes, we do.
She is being held in some kind of truck with who is with her? I can't remember the name now.
Karina, she got
Karina,
held up
right?
with her as well.
Yeah, they're being held together, and we know it's a some kind of a vehicle because we see it moving at the end, like they kind of get
Mm.
jostled in the back of the truck, kind of thing. So, Dave, what did you think of this episode?
Well, with just keeping it within the base of the episode, it definitely builds up drama and gives it that push of, oh man, this is fairly good. But I think it's mostly a question of how many episodes did they have in mind for the series before it got cut?
So, if I remember correctly, and I'll do a quick bit of research, I think they were going to do a 12 or 13 episode first season, and then it was going to go
Mm,
on from there.
okay.
I don't know if
Because
they had
that
like a
definitely
specific
seems.
episode amount in mind, but I know there was kind of like a longer term plan.
Mhm. Because this seems to be kind of the good halfway point of things, where race is the base of the storyline and whatnot, but this pushes the more immediate threat of things, the turning point, and really pushing towards the climax of things.
Yeah, okay.
Really pushing more into the bigger part of the story.
Yeah, so Fox greenlit the production in October 2006. In addition to the pilot, another 12 episodes were ordered. So there should have been 13 in the first season.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, especially with it getting cut off just as it was to there, it was definitely a marvelous case of, ugh.
Yeah, it's pretty great that this is a really good, like you said, midpoint for the season. We're introducing some new stuff. We've established that Karina and Alex's wife, I can't remember her name now, are together. So maybe they're going to do some shenanigans to get her out of there, or something's going to happen there. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, we're not going to see any of that.
Yeah, no. It's a bit sad. And then, of course, with the other storylines, it was kind of an interesting question of how things were going to pan out with the one single racer that lost her partner, how far she'll kind of go and what she'll have to do. The father and daughter getting back together and how that dynamic would supposedly change. And of course, with Ivy stealing the car at the end of the episode is mildly hilarious.
Yes. Now, we've talked about what we thought of the episode. What did you think of the series overall?
Series overall, with all the base of the story, is a decent enough concept.
Oh,
I'm
I think it's a
mostly
great
just
concept.
I'm mostly just wondering if it was a case of, like you said, if the focus should have been more placed on Alex with his particular concern within the race, or if more of the stories, or at least maybe about at least one of the stories, should have been more kind of developed or run alongside with it from there. Because mostly the thought with either how it was run now, it would most likely work. I mostly have to think of how many of the stories would either have to be shortened or fixed, or what would sort of fit for the time. Or the other concept I was thinking of with Alex having specific interactions with each of the characters in some sort of way as the race was proceeding, and then sort of seeing more of those stories develop alongside his.
Yeah, I mean, if I was running the TV show, I probably would have. Alex would have been the main character, obviously, and you could have the other racers kind of come in and out of his story. But I think that should be your main focus because it's the most interesting story.
Right, with that, not too much veering off and seeing what those specific people are doing, unless it's a specific focus of something that will affect Alex or what is going to happen within the race.
So, here's how I'll explain it. Like, so the episodes are about 45 minutes long
Mm,
when you cut out commercials and everything.
mhm,
I would have had 30 minutes focusing on Alex's story, and then have the other 15 minutes where you can kind of do little things with the rest of the cast, but
mhm,
primarily be feeding that as your main story.
mhm.
Yeah, that would have been kind of my way of doing it. I don't know if that's the right way or not, but that's probably what I would have wanted.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's always tricky with those sorts of things. Because if the main concept of the story doesn't immediately grab you, the other side things aren't going to really save it in most cases.
Yeah, no, you kind of live or die by that
Hmm.
main concept, that main story. I think the biggest thing that hurt the show was kind of Fox just fucking it over.
Yeah, it usually always is with the company with whatever's supposedly going on at the time or someone up in one of the higher chairs.
Yeah, well, it was an issue of I can't remember what they put it up against, but they put it up against something where it's like, well, moved it. Yeah, so they moved it to Mondays, where it was up against NBC's Deal or No Deal and ABC's Dancing with the Stars.
It's a bit of a challenge to try and face up with those.
Yeah, like that's kind of you're kind of screwing the series over before it even gets a chance to kind of get established.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that kind of like fucked it over.
Hmm. Again, with them trying to schedule shows in some sort of respect.
Yeah, I just want to take a quick peek at what the lineup looked like that year to see where would have been a better place to put it. But I have a funny feeling there might not have been a much better one.
Yeah, with around that time, with you mentioning Dancing with the Stars and with what I can kind of remember, there was usually at least something fairly big going on at least every single night in some kind of case.
Yeah, you couldn't put it on Mondays. You couldn't really put it on Tuesdays because then you're up against like NCIS and
Hmm.
the Unit or Shark, which were both fairly big shows. Also,
Hmm.
House and American Idol were on those nights, so that
Yep,
would have hurt it. Wednesdays, you're up against Criminal Minds and American Idol. That's not going to work well. Um,
definitely not.
Thursdays, you're either going up against Lost or you're going up against one of the Survivors, which wouldn't have turned out well.
And then, of course, there's Friday with the myriad of things that were most likely happening at the time.
Friday is a pretty. I would have kept it on Friday nights because there's not a
Maybe add
lot
it to the
really.
specific lineup that they usually have for those days.
Friday usually is kind of a death slot. Like, not a lot of networks put good programming on Friday nights, so they could have easily thrown it on Fridays at 8 and not really had to worry
Hmm.
about it.
No, maybe that's true. I might have gotten it confused with, again, I can't remember how many years ago that was, but more of the TGIF sort of slot that they had going in the late 90s or so.
Yeah, that I think that one like the whole TGIF thing ended by like the early 2000s, I think.
Okay.
It wasn't a big thing anymore. But anyway, it was a fun series to go back to, and it's disappointing that it didn't get more than 6 episodes.
Yeah, no. Again, at the very least, that it had something to kind of thrive and go off from that. Though I'm also kind of wondering, aside from the big stars that managed with inside of it, how much of a blip this really kind of is within the grand scheme of things.
I mean, you have a few like well-known people in it. Obviously, we have like Nathan Fillion and Emma Stone.
Hmm.
Dylan Baker's in it, who maybe isn't the biggest star, but he's consistently working, and he's been in. He was in this. He was in Trick or Treat. He's been in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, with things like that, most certainly. But it's nothing that you go searching on the internet and be like, oh, there's actually a fandom for this.
There probably is a small one, but it's one of those things that was so short-lived that it didn't really have time to attract a fandom.
Hmm.
Because like you look at other cult shows, like we'll use Kolchak the Night Stalker as an example. Like that show still at least got 20 episodes.
Mm.
So, like, it had time to build some kind of a fan base,
Mm.
which is a great series that maybe someday we'll do. Because, oh, is it good. Anyway, I think that's going to be it, unless you have anything else to add, Dave.
I think that's about it for the gas tank we have for this series.
Very good. Alrighty, so that is going to conclude the drive-through. I've been Paul.
And I've been Dave.